Picture this. You're standing in Times Square, but something is wrong. The giant screens flicker with yesterday's advertisements. Cars sit abandoned in perfect rows, their engines still warm. Coffee shops display fresh pastries behind glass, but no hands will ever reach for them again. The only sound is wind whistling through empty skyscrapers. You are the last human alive. As you walk through this monument to human ambition, nature is already beginning its work. Weeds push through sidewalk cracks. Birds nest in traffic lights. The Hudson River runs cleaner than it has in centuries. And for the first time in human history, no species will go extinct today because of us. Would this be a tragedy? Or would it be the greatest gift humanity ever gave the universe? This isn't just a thought experiment. Right now, as you listen to these words, 68% of wildlife populations have vanished since 1970. We are strip mining the oceans, turning forests into deserts, and pumping the atmosphere full of gases that are reshaping the climate faster than life can adapt. We have triggered what scientists call the sixth mass extinction, and unlike the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, this time we are the asteroid. But here's what makes this truly haunting. We know we're doing it. Every day, millions of us wake up with the knowledge that our mere existence, our food, our transportation, our entertainment, is built on the systematic destruction of the only planet we've ever known. We carry this weight in our chests like a stone. Some of us try to ignore it. Others become activists, vegans, minimalists. But a growing number are asking a question that cuts deeper than any lifestyle change or political movement. What if the problem isn't what we do, but that we exist at all? Philosopher David Benatar frames it with mathematical precision. The absence of pain is good, even if no one is there to enjoy it. But the absence of pleasure, that's neither good nor bad. It's simply nothing. If humanity had never evolved, there would be no war, no slavery, no factory farms, no climate change. The universe would be less conscious, yes, but would it be worse? Every single person watching this has wondered, at some dark moment, what if I had never been born? But how many have extended that question to our entire species? What if none of us had ever been born? Welcome to the philosophy of antinatalism, and to the most uncomfortable question our species has ever asked itself. For most of human history, this question would have been blasphemous. We were made in God's image, chosen as stewards of creation, the crown of existence itself. But something fundamental shifted in how we see ourselves, and that shift began long before climate change or factory farming or nuclear weapons. It began with the Buddha, sitting under the Bodhi tree 2,500 years ago, reaching a conclusion that still reverberates through philosophy today. Existence is suffering. Not just that existence contains suffering, but that to exist is to suffer. The very act of wanting, of being conscious, of being attached to the world, creates dukkha, a word that encompasses everything from minor disappointments to existential anguish. Buddhism's goal isn't to make life better, it's to escape the cycle of rebirth entirely, to achieve a state so complete that you never have to exist again. When you truly understand this, the Buddha taught, you realize that the kindest thing you can do for a potential consciousness is to ensure it never comes into being. Fast forward to 19th century Germany, where Arthur Schopenhauer was developing what he called his pessimistic philosophy. Schopenhauer looked at human nature and saw something that most philosophers had missed. We are creatures of want, and want is inherently painful. We suffer when we don't get what we desire, and we suffer when we do. Because satisfaction is always temporary, but the machinery of desire is permanent. All satisfaction, or what is commonly called happiness, Schopenhauer wrote, is really and essentially always negative only. Happiness isn't something we achieve. It's simply the brief absence of pain, the momentary relief from wanting. But pain is positive, concrete, undeniable. A universe without consciousness would be a universe without this endless cycle of craving and disappointment. But it took the 20th century to fully weaponize these insights. 2 world wars, the Holocaust, the atomic bomb. Suddenly, the Enlightenment dream of human progress through reason looked naive at best, dangerous at worst. We had created technologies that could end civilization in an afternoon, and we had used those technologies on each other with an efficiency that would have impressed any predator. Writers like Thomas Ligotti began exploring what he called the horror of existence, not the fear of death, but the fear of consciousness itself. In Ligotti's vision, awareness is a cosmic accident, a glitch in the program of existence that allows matter to suffer. We are the universe's mistake, cursed with the ability to experience our own meaninglessness. This wasn't just literature anymore. Philosophers like Julio Cabrera and later David Benatar began building rigorous academic arguments for what they called antinatalism, the belief that it is morally wrong to bring new conscious beings into existence. Not because the world is particularly cruel, but because consciousness itself contains more pain than pleasure, more frustration than satisfaction. Meanwhile, a parallel awakening was happening in environmental consciousness. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring revealed how our pesticides were creating a world where spring arrived without birdsong. The first photographs of Earth from space showed us our planet as a pale blue dot in an infinite void. Beautiful, yes, but also desperately vulnerable and utterly alone. The environmental movement began with the intention of saving nature. But as the scope of human impact became clear, some began to wonder if saving nature might require something more radical than recycling or renewable energy. Maybe it required saving nature from us. Yet even as these dark insights accumulated, other voices pushed back. Humanists argued that consciousness, however painful, was still the universe's greatest achievement. Through human minds, the cosmos had developed the ability to know itself, to create art, to love, to reach toward truth. Yes, we suffered, but we also experienced beauty. Yes, we destroyed, but we also created. The question wasn't whether existence contained suffering, it was whether the good outweighed the bad. Religious traditions offered their own counter-narratives. Humans weren't cosmic accidents. We were created with purpose, called to be gardeners of Eden rather than parasites on Gaia. Original sin explained our destructive tendencies, but also pointed toward redemption. We could choose to be better. But these competing visions shared one troubling assumption, that the question mattered. That consciousness, having evolved, was somehow obligated to justify its own existence. And this assumption led to an even more disturbing realization about human psychology. We are the only species that torments itself with the question of whether it should exist. Think about that for a moment. Lions don't lie awake wondering if the gazelles would be better off without them. Viruses don't contemplate the morality of reproduction. Even our closest relatives, the great apes, show no sign of existential angst about their place in the ecosystem. But we do. We are cursed, or blessed, with what psychologists call terror management theory. We know we're going to die, and this knowledge colors every moment of our existence. We build civilizations, create art, and have children, partly as defenses against our own mortality. But somewhere in our minds, we carry the weight of knowing that none of it will last. This awareness makes us capable of extraordinary empathy. We can imagine the suffering of factory-farmed animals, the despair of refugees, the anguish of future generations inheriting a broken planet. We have what neuroscientists call mirror neurons, brain cells that fire both when we act and when we observe others acting. We don't just see others' pain, we feel it. But empathy, it turns out, can be a curse. The more deeply we feel others' suffering, the more acutely we become aware of our role in causing it. Every meal, every purchase, every choice ripples outward in ways we can't fully track or control. We are trapped in what philosophers call moral luck. We can fully control the consequences of our actions, but we feel responsible for them anyway. Cognitive biases make this worse. Our brains are wired with what psychologists call negativity bias. We pay more attention to threats and problems than to opportunities and solutions. Bad news captures our attention more readily than good news. Traumatic memories stick with us longer than pleasant ones. From an evolutionary perspective, this made sense. The ancestors who ignored potential dangers didn't become ancestors for very long. But in the modern world, negativity bias becomes a trap. We experience what psychologists call the impact bias. We overestimate how much future events will affect our happiness and for how long. We think getting the promotion will make us happy forever, but it doesn't. We think losing the relationship will devastate us permanently, but we adapt. Positive experiences fade from memory, but the underlying machinery of dissatisfaction remains. This is what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. We're constantly running toward happiness, but never quite reaching it, because our brains are designed to return to a baseline level of satisfaction, no matter what we achieve. Meanwhile, suffering, physical pain, emotional anguish, existential dread seems to have no such baseline. It can always get worse. Add to this another cruel irony. We are suffering from what researchers call evolutionary mismatch. Our brains evolved to handle the social dynamics of small tribal groups, but now we're asked to make decisions that affect billions of people across hundreds of years. We're trying to manage global climate systems with cognitive hardware designed for tracking game animals and remembering which berries are poisonous. The result is a species with godlike power, but Stone Age psychology. We can split atoms and edit genes, but we still make decisions based on short-term tribal interests. We can model climate change with supercomputers, but we can't emotionally process threats that unfold over decades rather than minutes. Some psychologists argue that this mismatch explains our destructive behavior. We're not inherently evil. We're just poorly calibrated for the world we've created. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychologist, argued that humans can endure almost any suffering as long as they find meaning in it. The problem isn't that we suffer, it's that we suffer without purpose. But others push back against this optimistic reading. Thomas Ligotti and other philosophers argue that consciousness itself is the problem. We are, in his words, malignantly useless, aware enough to suffer, but not wise enough to stop creating suffering. Our ability to contemplate our own elimination might be the most honest thought our species has ever had. This debate has moved from philosophy departments to the internet, and what we find there is both fascinating and disturbing. On Reddit, the antinatalism community has over 200,000 members, sharing stories of their decision never to have children. Not because they don't like children, but because they believe bringing new consciousness into existence is inherently cruel. These aren't misanthropes or nihilists. Many are thoughtful, compassionate people who love life, but question whether creating more life is ethical. Meanwhile, surveys show that increasing numbers of young people are questioning whether to have children because of climate change. They're experiencing what psychologists call eco-anxiety and climate grief. Depression and anxiety specifically related to environmental destruction. Some report feeling guilty about their own carbon footprint, even as they recognize that individual actions pale beside systemic changes needed in energy, transportation, and agriculture. Social media amplifies these psychological pressures in unprecedented ways. Instagram creates curated versions of life that make our own existence seem inadequate by comparison. Twitter turns every news cycle into an apocalyptic crisis, requiring immediate emotional response. TikTok serves up an endless stream of content, designed to capture and hold our attention, regardless of its impact on our well-being. We are the first generation to carry the world's suffering in our pockets, accessible 24 hours a day. Every humanitarian crisis, every environmental disaster, every act of violence anywhere on Earth can reach us instantly. Our Stone Age empathy systems are overloaded by industrial-scale awareness of global pain. But the most disturbing development might be our growing comfort with the idea of human replacement. Artificial intelligence researchers increasingly speak of creating systems that might surpass human intelligence. Some explicitly frame this as humanity's next evolutionary step, or its endpoint. If we can create minds that are smarter, more rational, and less destructive than we are, shouldn't we? The voluntary human extinction movement, founded by Les Knight, advocates for exactly this, not through violence or coercion, but through voluntary childlessness. Their slogan is, "Live long and die out." They argue that the kindest thing we can do for future generations is to ensure there aren't any. Meanwhile, billionaires fund space exploration projects with explicit goals of making humanity a multi-planetary species. But critics ask, if we fail to live sustainably on one planet, why should we be trusted with others? Are we explorers seeking new frontiers or an invasive species planning to spread? The COVID-19 pandemic offered a glimpse of what a world with reduced human activity might look like. During lockdowns, air pollution dropped dramatically in major cities. Satellite images showed the Himalayas visible from northern India for the first time in decades. Animals reclaimed urban spaces. The canals of Venice ran clear. It lasted only months, but it raised uncomfortable questions. If a temporary reduction in human activity could produce such dramatic environmental improvements, what might permanent reduction accomplish? These aren't abstract philosophical questions anymore. Birth rates in developed countries are falling below replacement level. Young people are choosing careers over families, experiences over responsibilities, freedom over the biological imperative to reproduce. They're making these choices in the wealthiest, most educated, most connected societies in human history. Is this liberation from traditional expectations, or is it our species beginning to choose its own extinction? But here we arrive at the most beautiful paradox in all of philosophy. The very fact that we can ask whether we should exist, that we can contemplate our own elimination, weigh our costs against our benefits, imagine the universe without us, might be precisely what makes us worth preserving. Think about it. What other arrangement of matter in the known universe has ever questioned its own value? What other collection of atoms has ever felt guilt about its impact on other collections of atoms? What other pattern of chemistry has ever wondered whether the cosmos would be better off without it? We are, as far as we know, the only part of the universe that has developed the capacity for moral reasoning. Yes, this capacity torments us. Yes, it makes us aware of our failures and limitations, but it also makes us capable of choosing to be better. When Bach composed his Mass in B minor, was he adding something to the universe or subtracting from it? When Einstein glimpsed the curvature of space-time, when Sappho wrote about love, when your grandmother taught you to tie your shoes, were these moments of cosmic mistake or cosmic achievement? David Benatar argues that the absence of Bach's music would be neither good nor bad, since no one would be there to miss it. But this misses something crucial about existence itself. Bach's music didn't just create pleasure for human ears. It revealed mathematical relationships that were already woven into the fabric of reality. Art doesn't just entertain, it discovers. We are the universe's way of knowing itself, Carl Sagan said. Through human consciousness, the cosmos has developed the ability to contemplate its own structure, to appreciate its own beauty, to wonder about its own purpose. Yes, this consciousness comes with a price. We suffer in ways that rocks and rivers cannot. But it also comes with gifts that no other known form of matter possesses. Consider the responsibility paradox. We are the only species that can choose to be better. Lions cannot decide to become vegetarian. Viruses cannot develop empathy for their hosts. But we can examine our impact, feel regret about our failures, and change our behavior based on moral reasoning. This is simultaneously our greatest burden and our greatest hope. Indigenous cultures around the world developed ways of living that sustained human societies for thousands of years without triggering mass extinctions or climate change. The Haudenosaunee principle of seven-generation thinking required considering the impact of every decision on 7 generations in the future. Aboriginal Australians maintained complex ecosystems through controlled burning for 60,000 years. These weren't primitive societies failing to exploit their environment. They were sophisticated civilizations that had solved the problem we are struggling with today. This proves it's possible. Human consciousness doesn't inevitably lead to environmental destruction. Human societies can choose sustainability over growth, sufficiency over excess, wisdom over cleverness. But here's the deeper question. If we discovered a way to start over, if we found an uninhabited planet with perfect conditions for life, would we take it? Knowing everything we know about human nature, about our capacity for both creation and destruction, would we choose to plant the seeds of consciousness in virgin soil? I think the answer reveals something profound about how we really feel about existence itself. Because even knowing our failures, even carrying the weight of our impact, even tormented by the question of whether we should exist at all, most of us would choose existence. Not because it's easy or comfortable or free from suffering, but because consciousness, however painful, is still more interesting than emptiness. The question isn't whether a world without humans would be better. The question is whether we can become worthy of the world we have. What would you miss most if humanity disappeared tomorrow? The laughter of children, the beauty of music, the satisfaction of solving problems, the warmth of love. What would you want our species to contribute to the universe before we're gone? These answers might be more important than any philosophical argument about the value of existence. Because in the end, the case for human consciousness won't be made through logic alone. It will be made through what we choose to do with the consciousness we have. We are the only species that can ask whether we should exist. Perhaps that's exactly why we should.